to Free Media, Free Minds. Tonight with me, Chelsea Noah Ogilvy, and tonight we are wrapping up season 5 with episode 13 of Free Media, Free Minds. And tonight we'll have a look at media silence on environmental issues. So the long and the short of it is that we have no planet B. Our house is very much on fire, and global warming is a very real thing, despite what Donald Trump says. So social media has done its work to get the word out, but mainstream media not so much. And this is what we'll be addressing in tonight's episode. So we will be joined tonight by Rianka Krugel from Greenpeace, as well as Pooven Midley joining us from Natural Justice. We'll also be joined by Zara Omar from the Center for Environmental Rights, and Brittany Small will be joining us as an environmentalist herself. So for now, we'll head over to the V&A waterfront here in Cape Town, where we saw the docking of Greenpeace's ship called the Arctic Sunrise. So the Arctic Sunrise has sailed all around the world, addressing issues having to do with the protection of the oceans. And the Arctic Sunrise has docked in Cape Town to address our own issues of overfishing. Now, the docking of the ship itself should be enough to get you concerned about environmental issues if these don't concern you already. So let's have a look. We are out at Cape Town V&A. We're out on the ocean, getting out of the studio for once, and we are looking at the arrival or the docking of the Arctic Sunrise, which is a ship by Greenpeace, and they are coming into Cape Town to address overfishing issues. And just the ship being here itself, I think, is a conversation starter for us to look at climate change and environmental issues a little more seriously.
Our oceans are under immense stress as it is, and the climate crisis is a contributing factor to that. Whereas if we get a treaty in place, which Greenpeace is currently campaigning for at the UN level, along with 40 other NGOs, then that makes the oceans resilient, which means they're resilient to climate change.
Now that we've seen the covering of the docking of Greenpeace's ship called the Arctic Sunrise, we'll now get into a conversation with Rianka Krugel, who is Greenpeace's Deputy Project Leader for Mountains of the Sea ship tour. Let's hear what she's got to say. We are standing at the V&A with Rianka Krugel. Welcome to it.
Thank you, Chelsea.
It's good to have you on TTV.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So we are at the V&A. We are discussing environmental issues. Why is the media as quiet as it is about environmental issues?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? So it's difficult for me to speak to why media choose to selectively cover environmental issues. But what I can tell you is that that is exactly why NGOs like Greenpeace is working at the level that we are to engage political players where decisions are being made, and that's exactly what we are doing currently with the Oceans Treaty. So it's this United Nations Oceans Treaty that's currently being negotiated by 195 countries to put in place a network of ocean sanctuaries on the high seas that nobody technically owns, to protect the oceans, to protect the marine life, to protect the ocean's future, and the ocean's future is our future.
Precisely. I mean, we want to have kids who know what a dolphin is and who know what dolphins look like. So you said by 2030 we're trying to have 30% of the high seas protected. What do those figures look like at the moment?
I believe it's currently less than 4% is currently protected of the high seas. And to put that into context, I mean, it's difficult for our brains to comprehend, because the high seas cover 70%, or the oceans rather cover 70% of this planet's surface. Yeah. So all of the land mass altogether is not even half of what the ocean's mass is. So it's quite difficult to comprehend, but to think, in terms of that, asking to protect 30% of that, or as best as we possibly can by 2030, will have absolutely lasting impacts. And it will allow the oceans to recover in ways that it can't actually currently do.
All right, so talking about recovery, we've got a lot of work to do, and I do believe that the Earth has the capacity to heal itself. If we just give her the chance, she does have the capacity to heal herself. So in the day-to-day, you and I, people on the street, people watching at home, what can we do in our day-to-day to help the recovery of the Earth and its oceans?
Greenify I'm not sure that that's a word, but
how do we do that?
Created one, yes. So basically, it comes down to lessening your footprint, your carbon footprint on Mother Nature. So everything that we consume every day has a carbon footprint attached to it. The cars that we drive, the food that we eat, every single thing that we wear, everything is made, and that has a carbon footprint attached to it. So being more conscious in as far as you are able to, picking ethical labels, knowing where your food comes from, knowing where, when you buy fish, where is that coming from? Like, where in the ocean is that from? Who actually caught that fish and in what manner?
Can you tell us what does the BOAS have to do with Greenpeace?
So the BOAS is actually a really passionate partner of Greenpeace's, and what they do is the owner is extremely passionate about plastic marine pollution, right? And bringing that issue to the public and educating people around it. So we've partnered with them on quite a few ventures already. Awesome. And even today, when the Arctic Sunrise sailed into Cape Town, the BOAS was right there. So Greenpeace is but one organization, and a global organization, but we are the sum of our partners, and the BOAS is one of those partners.
All right, fantastic. So the Greenpeace's Arctic Sunrise ship sailed into or docked into the V&A today, and as far as I understand, the partners on board are coming into Cape Town to speak about overfishing. But we're in a post-Zuma economy, and a lot of our locals go out onto the oceans and they overfish, because that's what puts bread on the table at the end of the day. So how do we balance, facing post-Zuma economy, but at the same time protecting the oceans?
So we have to be quite clear on what the issue is here, and that is we are looking at protecting the high seas. So the fishing that you are referring to is happening in national waters, and I don't think that the threat cannot weigh up to that, the plundering that is currently happening on the high seas. And that's one of the threats that the ocean faces every day, because it's these waters that don't belong to any country. So essentially ships can just go in and take as much and as long as they want, and there's no regulation around that. So speaking to small scale fisheries like you are saying, it's not the Oceans Treaty, the UN Oceans Treaty, is not calling for regulation on that. It's calling for regulation on the high seas, for the 195 nations on this planet to come together. This is an historic moment, and we're going to look back in decades from now, and we're going to ask ourselves, on which side of history were we on for this one? And I'm hoping that we are on the right side, and we can put a network of ocean sanctuaries in place that's going to revitalize and give the oceans a chance to recover.
All right, fantastic. We are speaking to Reineke Krugel, joining us all the way at the V&A waterfront. So now that we've heard from Reineke Krugel speaking to us about the Arctic Sunrise, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll speak to Brittany Small joining us here in studio, as well as Pooven Mudley. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Free Media, Free Minds tonight, here with me, your host, Chelsea Noah Ogilvie, and we are speaking about media silence on environmental issues. So joining me in studio, we have environmentalist Brittany Small, as well as Pooven Mudley joining us from Natural Justice. Hello guys,
Hi.
How are you?
Good, and you?
Good, despite the very hot weather,
Yes.
unnatural hot weather outside. Okay, cool. So Brittany, you're an environmentalist, but Pooven, can you tell us a little bit about the work that Natural Justice does?
Great. So Natural Justice has been around for a decade now, working mainly with Indigenous and local communities, and it's a NGO of lawyers. And basically, over the last period, obviously climate change has become a massive issue across all the work we're doing. And I think a lot of the solutions will actually be coming now from Indigenous and local communities, which is something we ensuring also that happens.
All right, so we are in a crisis. We are in a hectic crisis.
An extinction, a mass extinction.
Exactly, and
people need to wake up.
We need to wake up,
Yeah.
and I think we need to rely on media as well to help wake us up. But what is this crisis? Before we even get into the media part of it, what is the crisis? What does it look like? How did we get here? Why do people not care?
That's such a big. It starts from far back as the 70s, when our greenhouse emissions started emitting very toxic gas. Also over-farming, overfishing. It's almost basically everything. Our ozone layer is probably looking so horrible right now. Yeah. Basically, long story short, is the human population just took way too much than we needed. and it became a very big issue quickly, and people are not trying to face it. Most people, it's not profitable. And we live in a capitalist society, especially with mainstream media. Mainstream media is very filtered. That's why we don't see a lot of it on, like a lot of the climate strikes, a lot of the climate activists on mainstream media. So we need to rely on social media for that, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think all of this has been quite systematic. It didn't happen by accident. And if you look at the way the capitalist system is structured, it's all about doing things big everything, big business. So big agriculture, big pharmaceutical, and big pollution in terms of fossil fuels. We could certainly have moved away from fossil fuels a long time ago because we do have the technologies that will bring us clean energy. But it's just a lot of that has been, kind of systematic interest for a few people to make a lot of money while the rest of the world struggles to lift out of poverty.
So we're really, I guess, weighing out, or rather we're giving our planet away for the sake of hamburgers and profits, really. So I think one of the climate crisis protests, I saw a banner that said profits over planet, the planet over profits. And I think that's what it's come down to. As you said, Proven, it's systematic. Like we're fighting against corporates who are trying to make money.
Underdogs fighting. The youth and, like I said, the indigenous people, like the Waironi people in the Amazons now that's under the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. It's all underdogs that are just trying to fight for the planet, and it's so hard going against that grain with that capitalist society and people that just want profits, and ultimately people who are going to leave this earth before we are doomed. Do you know what I mean? That's why the younger generation is also, Greta Thunberg is pushing it really hard. It's up to us, unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we are in a position where it's doom or gloom, and we are looking. I think I had a conversation in the week with one of my older friends, and he was really didn't care about the planet. He was like, I've lived my best life. I don't need to worry about the planet anymore. But when I speak to people like Brittany and people younger than Brittany, people like Greta Thunberg, I mean, like I've ever spoken to her in my life. But
I wish.
I wish.
Great to
But
have you sing this.
These kind of young mentalities are the people who are pushing for that. But we don't see the same happening on the other side of the age spectrum, if you will.
Yeah.
Why is that the case? Proven, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have become complacent. We've just, live our lives in a certain way, thinking no matter what we do, it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at the science reports, I mean, basically we have a decade to transform radically and fundamentally, and we don't really see that happening now. I mean, obviously there's pressure and pushes coming from different, I mean, the young people have been amazing. I was in the march with 250,000 people in New York recently, and it was just incredible.
Yeah.
That kind of energy.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, when it started in the morning, each section of the crowd was amazing. So you had all the indigenous communities from South America being part of it, with the rhythm and the beat and what they bring
it's
to
like
it.
rawness.
Yeah, but also just like young people who have just left school for the day. Very, the energy was incredible, but also, the feeling of things will definitely change. And, they are going to provide the leadership. But I do agree, I think it's others who need to support that, not to neutralize that kind of movement that's there.
So we have strikes going on, we have hashtags going on, we have shows like this going on. Is it enough? What do we need? We have a systematic problem, like we said. But so in solving a systematic problem, how do we fix that? Are protests enough? Are hashtags enough? We need
all the pressure.
Yeah.
We need all the pressure we can get. We need all the exposure that we can get for it to transform into something political. For the government to say, okay, well, this is really it's basically a fire that we're starting. Until the heat gets really hot, like metaphorically and physically, we are very doomed. But if we can all just make a conscious effort to push that systematic change in a different direction, I think we can go very far. But people just need to care. We really need to just convince people that they are a part of the environment and not going against it. So,
I think a systematic change with the mental change, I think we do need individual change, but we also need systematic change, and the two work together, but we need them both very seriously.
Yeah, we can't have one without the other.
Exactly. So how do we get to a point where we have systematic change?
I mean, for me, I think, as you mentioned, I think one is your own personal awareness and transformation that needs to happen. And that, I think, will, start ensuring that, whatever you're putting out starts to shift. And in that sense, I think, we're always looking to other people for change.
Yeah.
So because Greta is doing this job, we think, okay, let's leave
Let's
it in.
let her.
And then we don't take the responsibility. So I think it's that personal responsibility
Yes.
in every community we come from and so on. But there's also, like we work a lot with communities around going to court, stopping a coal plant, for example, or ensuring indigenous people's rights are protected, because we can't gloss over all those violations that have happened and say, okay, we're in a crisis, so let's not worry about everything, because all of that has brought us to this crisis. So it's those daily struggles that are important.
I think that schools could do a really good job
Yeah.
in trying to, especially because we are trying to push systematic
And
change
the
with
school
young
strike
people.
for climate, Fridays for
Precisely.
future, yeah. Exactly.
Precisely. So, I mean, if we bring it back to South Africa, how possible is curriculum change that looks at the environment in a different way?
I don't know how possible it is, but it's so necessary. I think if we push in education, the education system right now, like we've got life orientation, and I don't know, I was in school a year ago. Yeah, a while ago, but exactly, we can really integrate that into something that is interpersonal for the actual learner, that makes them want to learn about the environment and to curate. I saw something the other day on Facebook where they said indigenous farming or sustainable farming should be taught in schools, how to grow a crop, do you know what I mean? It's just that personal relationship with the student and the environment that I think we really should bring into our school system.
Yeah, I think part of it is also like, I think we need a different type of leadership.
Definitely.
The leadership in most countries comes from a very old school of thinking.
Yeah.
That's true.
And we need leadership that will, take
Step
us
outside
into
of the box,
future.
because that's what we need right
Yeah.
now. If
Yeah.
we don't have that systematic change where we step outside of, and we all just agree on it. We just say, look, that's the way things have been done for the past few years, but it's not working anymore. It's in the facts. The science says it. We need to work together to get a little bit of a better political stance all over the world on this crisis.
Okay, we are going to take a bit of an ad break, and when we come back, we'll chat a little bit about veganism as well and how veganism contributes towards saving the planet and whether or not that's enough. And we'll also look into, as we were mentioning or as we were speaking about leadership, and the fact that currently our government is very much like grow, produce, and how that affects our future. All of this coming up after the ad break. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Free Media, Free Minds. Tonight with myself, Chelsea Ogilvie, Brittany, and Pooven. So we are discussing environmental issues, media silence on it. And before the break, we spoke a bit about veganism, which we'll get into in a second. But first, let's speak about government, because we are speaking systematic change. And currently, our current leaders in government are very produce, more is better. Let's just, make more by all means possible. How does that contribute towards our crisis?
If I can maybe use a local example of government decision making. So the Philippi horticultural area is a farming area. It supplies Cape Town about 70% of its vegetables. It's a massive carbon absorption area, so it's good for the environment. And underneath the area is a massive aquifer that has the same water source as 5 of the biggest dams in Cape Town. Now, the decision the government took was to do sand mining in the very same area, which threatens this aquifer, but also to build, middle-income houses and other things on this area. So once you close up this area, the aquifer dies because it requires the ecosystem to recharge it. Now, it's hard to understand how we have, people making decisions that will benefit a few companies versus, majority of the people. And those are the things that need to shift at all levels, from local government and city planning and city development, and obviously people need housing and so on, but you need to do it in a very sustainable way. And those are the things that need to shift in terms of leadership and how we need to think differently, because we can't afford it and we don't have much time to be making decisions. Or recently government passed its energy plan. Coal remains a massive part of the energy plan, and if globally we have to cut all emissions by 45% in the next decade, and we continuing to do coal, it doesn't make sense in that decision.
It's just not sustainable.
Not at all.
I think it all goes back to systematic, sustainable, and then versus profits.
Yes.
Just over and over and over again. But let's talk a bit about veganism. A lot of people have gone to veganism in protest, in their contribution in saving the planet. But not everybody knows how veganism actually does contribute towards the planet.
Yeah.
So, Brittany, as a vegan, can you maybe just...
Yes, I can definitely tell you. So most of our factory farming, especially our beef factories, take up a lot of our industrial farming and a lot of land, and takes up so much water, even our greenhouse gases that we emit. By going vegan, you save... There's a statistic in my mind I can't say. There's so many statistics, basically how it shows that veganism impacts the planet in a very positive way, and it's all in very different ways. Animal cruelty, because veganism, there's a very big difference between veganism and plant-based. Plant-based is your plant-based diet, which is a vegan diet, but veganism is an actor. It's like
a movement.
Yes, it's a movement. Cruelty-free products and overfishing, like being, just being sustainable in a way. So I do think veganism has a very big impact on our future if people can just put the planet over themselves, just over burgers, just for a little while, and then we'll talk, like if we just get the planet back to the way that it needs to be, healthy, and then you can have a burger.
But I feel, veganism isn't a diet that's accessible to everyone. And
Not at all.
I mean, we have issues of overfishing, but we also are in a post-Zuma economy, and we need, people are like, I don't have a job, but there's a whole ocean of fish, so I'm going to go and fish.
But it all goes up with conscious effort. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to go 100% vegan. It is a personal choice. It is a lifestyle choice. But if you can just make a conscious effort to even just not use plastic, you are 1 in 7 billion people that are making it's making a difference. Whether you think it or not, it makes a huge difference, just that conscious effort.
Proven as being vegan enough?
I don't think it's enough. I think, as you say, it's personal choices. I think, and if you see what's happening with the Amazon fire as an example, I mean, that's for large-scale agriculture, for beef largely. And whatever's left of the planet is being decimated because of this big industry. For me, a lot of it is about sustainability. It's how do you live in a sustainable way. So people, in very rural and remote areas who live in a sustainable way is really what's required. So it's kind of shifting from big-scale agriculture to small-scale farming. That's organic, that's, you work with the soil in a way that you're not making it toxic and that poison seeping into rivers. So it's shifting all of that, but we have to get away from the big-scale things to doing things more locally. So if we're growing food in Cape Town, that's where the food needs to be eaten, not shipped somewhere else or food brought in.
Exactly.
But again, we're fighting against corporates and money.
And
so,
all of those beautiful things.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that sustainability is at the core of it all. And I think the problem with beef production, for example, is the fact that it's happening on such a massive scale.
Exactly. We
have
just scale it down a little bit, it would make such a big difference.
Exactly. But yes, let's get a little bit into the media coverage of environmental issues. That's what we're here about today. We have seen social media do its job. We've seen a lot of hashtags. We've seen we've seen with the climate strike.
Yeah, Fridays for Future.
We've seen that on social media.
Yeah.
But we don't see it as much on traditional media. We don't see it. I mean, the irony of this show is the fact that, we're addressing media, the silence of traditional mainstream media on these issues. In your opinion, guys, why is the media so quiet about these issues?
It's filtered. Once again, it's not profitable. Mainstream media is there for profit gain and also, yes, to bring light to situations. But if it's not in a profitable view, it's not going to be pushed at all. The agenda won't be pushed. But that's why social media is such an amazing thing, the age that we live in. I feel like if we didn't live in a social media age, we wouldn't have been able to stop the climate crisis. I mean, most of us wouldn't even know what's going on. I think that's why it's got a lot of caution now. But it's definitely, it's so filtered in the mainstream media, and I think we can change that. I definitely think we can change that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, a lot of it is obviously linked to money. And many media houses are struggling, except those, big conglomerate type of media houses. And they, obviously push a very specific narrative. So if you, getting adverts paid by fossil fuel companies, that's a line you're generally going to take. I'm saying this broadly. I think with South African media, I mean, there's been very few journalists. And there's some good examples now. So Kevin Bloom from Daily Maverick, Leonie Joubert, and so on, have been really writing a lot about climate. But generally, even if you pull journalists together, not many of them right now, even, it's hard to understand why, but are writing in the traditional media around climate. The other thing for me is also the language we use, because, when we talk about climate, people kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. But if you break it down to what does it mean in terms of water, in terms of food, in terms of your daily life and so on, then you start reaching more people, because I think some people just, once you say climate, they're like, okay, that's what it is, but it doesn't affect me.
All right, so I mean, I think if we look at the media, I think it's the media, if it's going to be media, the media has to be media. And the media can't be, yes, the media is business. Yes, fair. But I feel like media must be media. You must broadcast. That is your job on the one hand.
Exactly.
But if you want to be a business, then
you
the
have
media
a platform.
must
There comes a responsibility with that.
Exactly.
Every platform comes with a responsibility. Social media platforms and mainstream media platforms. You have a responsibility to teach the public about something. You ultimately, journalists, you're a teacher. You're a storyteller. It's so that's the foundation of all media, whether you want profit or not. That's how it all started out, storytelling back in the day, before we could even imagine all the digital stuff that we have right now.
But I mean, right now the media we have audiences, and we sell audience to businesses, we sell our audiences to advertisers, and that very directly contributes to the type of things that we can broadcast. Which brings it all the way back to money again.
But the thing is, like, now that I feel like social media has given environmentalism a hype, more companies are leaning towards that. Very, very slowly. I feel like you can see.
Because it is fashionable to be.
Exactly, that's the thing. It's like, it's starting to become a trend, but it's a trend that we really need above all the trends that we've ever had. I think if mainstream media can see that they can build an audience with vegans or environmentalists, then that's unfortunately the sad reason why they will start to lean towards it, but it'll be a step in the right direction.
Nevertheless,
Yeah, I also think, as we go forward, it's going to be not incremental changes that will happen. It'll be very exponential.
Yes.
And we'll start seeing, the difference. And it'll force media to be covering this stuff, because that's going to be the preoccupation of people on a daily basis, and that's what people want to read about, talk about, or hear about. So I think it will be forced to go into that space anyway.
As it becomes more and more popular, as
we just need to keep pushing.
We need to keep pushing.
We really do.
All right, cool. Let's start wrapping up our conversation. Day to day, as I said, in previous interviews, I always ask, how can me, you, and everyone else in the studio do better on a day-to-day basis as human beings, as people who are in this massive population of the globe? What can we do on a day-to-day as individuals to be more environmentally conscious?
Once again, it's just those little conscious efforts. Like if you go to the grocery store, most grocery stores now will give you a paper bag instead of a plastic bag. Like I said, it's those very small changes, but if you just have that conscious effort of saying, I'm going to pay R2 extra just so that I don't harm the environment. And a lot of people do say, okay, it's one straw, it's one plastic bag, it's not going to make a difference, but that's something that 7 billion people have said for the past few, So just making a conscious effort, not wasting water, maybe biking to work or walking to work instead of, and it's going to be hard, it's going to be very difficult. It's something outside of yourself, especially like with veganism and everything like that. But just that conscious effort is very important.
Yeah, I think for me it's just going back to first principles or the basic things, like if you think about respect, just respecting each other as people, but also then respecting nature, you know, and we have to shift back. I think we've been, everything we've been taught and so on, we need to unlearn a lot of those things so that we become better people. And I think without that, we just keep doing the same things over and over. And, this whole model of competition that we've, been pushed down our throats all our lives about the best way is to compete with each other. I think we have to shift to that cooperation model where both with people and nature again, where we live our lives in a very different way. And as you say, it's a day-to-day things.
Yes.
You get up in the morning and you're like, okay, let me be a better person. And that's what's going to shift things.
Definitely.
All right, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
We're going to take an ad break. Welcome back to it from the ad break. You are still watching Free Media, Free Minds with me, Chelsea Noah Ogilvie, and tonight we are discussing media silence on environmental issues. So just putting the entire conversation we've had into a more legal perspective, we are joined by Zara Omar from the Center of Environmental Rights. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So we are discussing environmental issues, and a lot of people don't know that the environment itself has rights. Why does the environment need to have rights in the first place?
So something I heard an ecologist say once really stuck with me, and she said, we as human beings have given ourselves rights. We have the right to life. But how can we say that we have the right to life when that which gives us life doesn't have its own right to life? So as humans, I think we really need to understand that we are so interlinked with the environment. We are so interdependent with the environment.
We are from the environment.
Exactly.
So can you tell us a little bit about what CER does?
So as CER, we are a group of activist lawyers, as we like to call ourselves, and we help communities and civil society organizations in South Africa realize their constitutional right to a healthy environment, to an environment that's not harmful to their health and well-being.
All right, fantastic. So why, you did mention that it's important that the environment has rights, because we are from the earth, we are, we come out of the earth and from the stars, and I think a lot of people are in denial about that, one of them being Donald Trump, but we'll get into that. So can you tell me, are the rights of the environment currently adhered to?
So, of course, in South Africa, we have environmental legislation, and that legislation is great. However, it's not always implemented. It's not always adhered to by corporates, for example.
So, Zara, you mentioned corporate relationship to the environment. Is it in corporate's interest to be environmentally friendly? In other words, is it profitable?
I think it stems from our whole economic system, which still sees the environment as an object,
as a
something
resource,
exactly to be exploited by humans for their own gain. And corporates really need to stop seeing themselves as separate to the environment. And profits shouldn't be their main objective. Protecting the environment, protecting livelihoods should be at the forefront of the agenda.
I mean, that's in a perfect world, I think. We would have corporates giving a hoot about the environment, but that isn't always the case. So how do we begin to address that? How do we begin to say to corporates that they need to consider that profits aren't everything?
Well, that's a big part of the work we do at the CER. We really assess the policies of these corporates in terms of environmental obligations. We point out where they're going wrong, we point out their violations, and we just try to engage with them around better practice in terms of protecting the environment.
Can you maybe tell us about a case that you handled recently or in the past, speaking on what you just said?
Sure, so I'll tell you a bit about our full disclosure series. So that's a series of reports which really assesses listed companies in South Africa around their compliance with environmental laws. And what we do is really expose their failures to comply with these laws, and we publish these reports on our website so that communities can use this information to really be informed about how they are contributing to environmental injustices.
All right, Zara, so if we bring the conversation back to the media, how has CER engaged with the media looking at, or rather to expose corporate-fueled environmental injustices?
So the CER engages a lot with journalists and media houses. They really support the work that we do. They value the work that we do. For example, for our full disclosure series, we invited journalists to the launch of our report, so they can really be at the front, have front row seats to the work that we do and engage with the communities that we represent on a daily basis.
So would you say that there is a media silence on environmental issues?
I think the tide is turning now. I think we're seeing a lot of environmental journalists that are really dedicated to exposing environmental issues now, and they really understand the urgency of the climate crisis and the environmental issues in our society and globally.
All right, fantastic. So we have gotten into media and social media on this topic, but if we are speaking legalities here. So if we look at the PAIA, the Protection of Access to Information Act, can you just expand a little bit on the effectiveness of it?
Sure. So the Promotion of Access to Information Act is the legislation that we have that really enables us to ask for information from public and private bodies. The CER is part of the Access to Information Network, which is a network of civil society and media organizations in South Africa that really work to advancing our transparency laws and our laws around access to information. And what we as a network have seen over the years is that while we have this legislation that enables us to access information, there are a lot of challenges with the legislation. So just as an example, it's not really simple to use. The requests for information have to be in a specific format, which requires access to technology, and not everyone has access to technology. Often the government bodies don't respond to our requests for information. So there are challenges with it, but I think it's still good that this mechanism exists to enforce our right of access to information.
And it obviously does have a link in achieving a safe and a clean environment.
Absolutely. I mean, in compiling our reports, we always use this tool to access information from corporates and government bodies, and then use that information to show how they aren't complying with environmental laws.
All right, so Zara, as we begin to wrap up, over 25 years ago, there was no litigation around environmental rights, and your work is therefore mind-blowing and groundbreaking in that sense. Do you agree? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So when we litigate, we don't just pick and choose any case that we want, one that will attract media attention, for example. We really look for ones that can change the legislation, that can really improve our environmental legislation in South Africa. And that's how we choose our cases, and we try to represent communities that really need the help and really need to be protected from environmental degradation.
Okay, before we close off, does our constitution do enough to protect our environment?
Yes, I mean, we have an absolutely wonderful constitution. We have Section 24, which is our environmental right, that says everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to their health and well-being. And I think our challenge in South Africa is just implementing this constitution that we have.
Bringing the constitution onto the ground.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, I think it's nice to think that, you know, our constitution is backing us, our constitution is there for the environment, and like you said, we have a very attractive constitution, but being able to see it on the ground on a day-to-day in real life is just a whole other story.
Exactly.
Last question. How do we bring the constitution to life a little bit more? Me, you, and everyone here in the studio, as everyday people, how do we do that?
I think we need to be active citizens in our democracy. We need to really see the country for what it is. We need to see where we can improve the country, where we can improve implementation of the laws. We can help communities, for example, and really just working together to make this country a better place.
Fantastic. If you want to make the country a better place, I think a fantastic, in fact, place to start is with your garden, with your most immediate environment, the planet that we live on. And like we said, we have no planet B. So it's worth it to care about these issues. So this is Zara Omar speaking to us from CER on today's issue on the environment and media silence on that. So in a little bit, we are going to get into our community notice board. Check this out. And that was our community notice board for this week. And that's also how we wrap up this season of Free Media, Free Minds. Thank you so much for joining me for this season. And you can keep up the conversation on Instagram at Free Media, Free Minds, or on Facebook at Free Media, Free Minds. From me, Chelsea Noah Ogilvie, thank you so much. Keep it real, and if it's unreal, keep it anyway.